They call them moments you can't quite explain. Small, ordinary scenes that tilt ever so slightly into something that doesn't fit. This collection gathers 8 of those moments. Amateur footage, security clips, and first-hand accounts. Each one carrying a chill that lingers after the picture goes dark. Stay with us until the end, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. Reddit submission, Akron, Ohio. A late shift clerk is stacking shelves when something moves in the cereal aisle. The camera is grainy, the fluorescent hum constant. The footage shows a dark, child-sized silhouette slipping between the rows and vanishing behind a display of boxed goods. Present tense. The clerk walks toward the sound, breath quick, and the silhouette is gone. Off camera, the clerk says, "I swear there was a little kid. Did you see that?" The clip plays back in slow motion. A small shadow detaches from the floor and seems to press itself against the edge of a stacked display before dissolving. Context. Store cameras often distort shapes when light changes, and a shopper's coat or a stray mop can create odd outlines. Witness reaction. Shaken, the clerk locks down the aisle and calls a coworker. Final note. Some say a reflection from a passing car explains the figure. Others point to the way the shadow seems to lift rather than walk, an odd, childlike tilt that unsettles even the hardened commenters. Doorbell cam, suburban Dallas, Texas. A homeowner checks the footage after repeated late-night knocks. The clip opens on a front porch in damp light. A puff of breath fogs the lower edge of the frame. There is a faint rap at the door. No footsteps on the walkway, no headlights in the street. A shape stands a few feet away, featureless in the grain, then fades as if swallowed by the porch light. The homeowner's voice, clipped and tired, appears in a quick on-screen transcription. "I opened and nobody was there." Context. Porch cameras are small and wide-angled, prone to lens flare and motion blur. Analysis. A late passerby or prank is plausible, but the knocks recur over several nights in the footage, always at 2:13 a.m., always 3 light taps. Emotional tie-in. The homeowner admits to sleeplessness, to checking the locks more than usual. The clip leaves the sense not of threat, but of being studied, of privacy turned fragile. Trail cam, Cascadia Mountains, Oregon. A remote wildlife camera records the steady arrival of evening. Wind in the pines, a deer stepping across the frame. Then a crow drops into view, alighting on a stump. It cocks its head and stares not at the deer, but into the camera itself. For nearly 30 seconds, the bird remains unnaturally still. Then a second crow glides in and lands directly behind the first, and the 2 crows pivot in perfect unison. The witness who uploaded the clip captions it, "Creepiest thing my trail cam has ever caught." Context. Corvids are known for intelligence and intimidating stillness. Analysis. Coordinated behavior among crows is documented, but viewers fixate on timing and direction, how the birds seem to track the lens, not the landscape. The symbolic echo is clear. Crows in folklore herald contact, warning, or omen. Whether omen or coincidence, the sound design of the clip, the sudden quiet after the wind, leaves a small cold spot in the chest. Mobile phone clip, single-room trailer, rural Oklahoma. A young man records what he intends to be a joke, a shaky hand held through a narrow living room toward a box of children's toys. The toys are strewn after a move. A deflated balloon rests against a chair. He narrates, half laughing, "We're cleaning up. Watch this." As he pans, a small plastic horse on the floor tilts as if pushed by an invisible finger, then rolls, nudging another toy. The cameraman swears under his breath, "No way! Did you just see that?" Context: trailers have drafts, uneven flooring, pets, and poles of light that move as someone shifts. Possible explanation: vibration, a pet, or an unseen hand. The emotional detail matters. The man has a backstory he tells in a short caption. He's new to the trailer after his sister moved out. Neighbors later mention she often kept a child's room for a niece who passed years ago. Some viewers draw the connection, a childlike presence. Others call it a prank staged for clicks. The clip refuses to answer, and that refusal is where the dread grows. Baby monitor, upstate New York. A mother leaves her infant sleeping and checks the monitor from the couch. The feed shows the nursery dimly lit, toys arranged in a semicircle. For a long, breathless beat, nothing happens. Then a shadow, thin and low, crosses the doorway and erases a strip of light from the floor. The mother, whispering into the phone with a friend, says, "I just saw something move in the doorway." She rises and opens the door. No one is there. Context: baby monitors compress video and can create smears when the camera adjusts exposure. But the shadow moves with a deliberate, childlike pause, stopping, as if listening, and then retreats. Analysis: some suggest a neighbor or a passing animal triggered the motion detector camera. Others point to the joystick sway that recalls a child's gait. The mother, exhausted and protective, cannot shake a sudden, irrational worry. The footage lingers in the mind like a half-remembered nightmare. Convenience store, CCT, Leeds, UK. A late-night shopkeeper reviews tape after a customer reports an odd patron. The footage shows a man in a dark hoodie at the far aisle who approaches the counter and, without touching anything, causes a row of canned goods to topple in a neat, rolling wave. The man never appears on any other camera. He stands still, hands in pockets, watching the cascade as if he expected it. The clerk appears in a brief interview clip. "I opened up this morning and everything was knocked over in a line, like someone had blown through." Contexto e análise. Shelves can fall from unstable stacking, a vacuum of pressure caused by a heavy door slam, or a deliberate push. Skeptics point to hidden magnets, thread, staging. Yet viewers fix on the man's calmness, too composed for an accident, too composed for a prank. The clip reads as performance or provocation, and the silence after the clatter is what makes the moment sticky. A pause where neighbors' footsteps would normally fill the space, but here there is only the hum of refrigeration and a feeling of being watched. Instagram direct message, small-town Texas funeral. Family footage records a private moment after a service. A single balloon, released in memory, floats in a still, sunlit lobby. The balloon drifts toward a ceiling vent. Wind from outside should pull it sideways, but the balloon shoots straight up against the current, gliding as if toward something unseen. A niece, voice breaking, says on the recording, "It went right to the corner where her photo is." Context: balloons find rising currents and thermal pockets. Alternative readings: static electricity, drafts, or carefully timed release. The family chooses to see a message, a sign that their loved one is near. In the comments, strangers offer condolences and their own stories of little miracles. The clip is not intended to convince skeptics. It's meant as solace, and that intent changes how people watch. Whether coincidence or comfort, the image of a lone balloon hovering over a portrait is a small, precise punctuation to grief. Parking lot security cam, suburban Los Angeles. A group of teenagers return to a car under sodium vapor lights. One of them points to a shadow by the rear bumper. It detaches from a puddle and stands upright for a breath, a human shadow reflected like a second self, then collapses back into the slick. The teen whispers into a running phone, "That can't be, it's moving on its own." The clip shows water moving with an unnatural reluctance, the reflection resisting the surface. Context: reflections behave when a camera moves or when wind disturbs surface tension. The anomaly here is the timing. The reflection's motion precedes the subject's movement by a fraction, as if the reflected figure acts of its own accord. Commenters debate optics, lens artifacts, and the possibility that a second person lurked just out of frame. The visceral reaction, hair standing up, the slow realization that something doesn't obey physical rules, makes the scene memorable. Apartment surveillance, Brooklyn brownstone. Neighbors upload a dashcam of a man leaving his building at dawn, carrying groceries. He returns 2 hours later to search the lobby, concerned, and unlocks a door with a key. The next footage, from a welfare check camera, shows police and paramedics entering an apartment. The narrative overlay provided by the uploader is sparse. The tenant was later found deceased. The clip shows officers moving with the flat, practiced speed of those who have seen too much. No graphic imagery appears. The camera turns away. Context: here, the footage is not about spectacle, but aftermath. Witness testimony, brief and respectful, recounts the loneliness neighbors noticed, mail piling up, curtains long closed, and the quiet, shocking discovery that followed. Analysis: some viewers connect the earlier odd clips submitted from the same building, a flicker at a window, a child's laughter on an empty stairwell, with this tragic outcome. Others warn against drawing supernatural conclusions from human suffering. The emotional core is plain: loss, isolation, and the terrible question of whether anything unseen was trying to signal or merely shared the same unlucky timing. The clip closes on a lit window for a moment, the thin rectangle of domestic light, and that small warmth feels like what remains. Between these encounters, motifs reappear: the childlike tilt of a shadow, an object that moves without a hand, birds that refuse to look away. Sometimes the pattern is coincidence. Sometimes it is a rhythm that suggests meaning. The narrator avoids certainties. Each clip is a junction where plausible natural causes exist side by side with moments that resist tidy explanation. Present tense descriptions keep the footage immediate. Brief witness quotes: "I opened and nobody was there. No way, did you just see that?" preserve the human pulse. The final, weightier moments are not about spectacle, but about aftermath. In several of these accounts, the people involved are left with questions that don't care for neat answers. Neighbors who notice a light staying on night after night. A mother who cannot sleep after the shadow in the nursery. a clerk who locks the aisle and feels watched. Sometimes the simplest, most human response is the most affecting. A niece holding a balloon, choosing meaning in the middle of grief. In other cases, the footage prompts practical follow-up, checking locks, calling a friend, swapping monitors for models with infrared clarity. The interplay between ordinary life and the uncanny is what makes the clips linger. They are, at root, domestic disruptions. A grocery aisle, a porch, a living room. Skepticism threads through the viewing community. Analysts point to lens flare, compression artifacts, drafts, prank staging, pets, and social media incentive structures. Believers counter with timing, repetition, and the emotional tone of the witnesses. Both sides produce arguments that help us see the seams of the phenomena. What remains is ambiguity, and ambiguity is a kind of story, open-ended, insistently present. Several witnesses asked to keep their names partly withheld. Commenters respected that request, offering theories rather than accusations. Where death is involved, the narration slows and softens. It refuses to exoticize pain. Descriptions are careful, focusing on the human response rather than grotesque detail. When grief enters the frame, a locked door, a funeral balloon, neighbors whispering, the footage becomes a document of mourning as much as mystery. If there is a through line, it is this. Ordinary frames, watched long enough, reveal things that don't fit tidy categories. Whether one calls them haunts, glitches, memories, or tricks of light depends less on the image than on the viewer's willingness to accept not knowing. Some viewers watch to debunk, others to confirm long-held suspicions about the thin place at the edge of perception. Most watch for the same reason people gather in the dark: to hear a story, to feel something move across them, and to leave altered, if only slightly. At the close of the sequences, the narrator leans in, not to sell a conclusion, but to invite participation. These clips come from people who live with the strange, who keep cameras to feel safer or to prove that the uncanny touches them. The power here is communal. In comments and private messages, strangers swap theories and small comforts. If you've ever caught an inexplicable moment on your own feed, if you've held a balloon and felt it rise with purpose, if you've heard a sound in the house and wondered whether you imagined it, there is an open place at the center of these encounters where your experience belongs. We will continue to collect, to watch, and to listen. Send your footage and your stories, clear files, brief context, and any follow-ups, so these moments can be examined with care, skepticism, and the respect victims and witnesses deserve. Tell us what you think in the comments. Natural explanation, staged, or something else entirely. For now, the images we keep replaying serve as small proofs of how fragile the line is between the ordinary and the inexplicable. A line we cross every night when the lights go down and the eyes adjust. People who study these clips, amateur sleuths, technicians who tune cameras for a living, and a handful of journalists who keep returning to the subject, treat them like a kind of fieldwork. They catalog frame by frame, noting the angle of the lens, the time code, the weather, whether the house has a drafty window, what model of camera was used. They trade spreadsheets and annotated screenshots in private threads, drawing attention to the small consistencies. A shadow that moves against the grain of the light, a balloon that tilts toward an empty corner, a sound whose waveform refuses to line up with any visible source. This is work that wants to reduce strangeness to variables. It is also work that often fails. The footage stubbornly preserves its own ambiguities, and the more you look, the more questions you raise. There are other, quieter responses. Families develop private protocols. One widow puts a glass of water on the mantel each night. A neighbor knocks 3 times before entering an empty house, as if checking on the house itself. A mother sits in the nursery until dawn after the shadow appears, and then, the next day, she reviews the footage again, slower, until each frame becomes a map of what she can and cannot accept. Rituals form out of the desire to contain the uncanny, to make it legible. Some adopt humor as a defense, jokes in group chats, memes that shrink fear into something shareable. Others withdraw, closing their feeds and letting months slide without mentioning anything to a friend. The variety of human response becomes part of the archive. Social dynamics shape which clips are amplified. Videos that suggest narratives, loss that lingers, a child's laugh after a funeral, a balloon that refuses to descend, travel fastest. They fit into the communal grammar we already know: grief, consolation, small miracles. By contrast, clips that are messy, that resist tidy explanation, but lack emotional architecture, tend to sink into comment sections where technical critique drowns out human feeling. This selection bias teaches the collective something about hope and hunger. We share what helps us tell a story, and the stories we tell feed back into the next submissions. Ethics are constant. Editors and moderators debate whether to blur faces, to withhold timestamps, to respect requests from witnesses who ask for anonymity. A producer in one city refuses categorically to publish anything involving a child without parental consent. Another accepts footage only if the family signs a release and provides a note explaining the context. People who send in clips sometimes do so as evidence, sometimes as confession, sometimes as plea. The act of sending is itself a form of trust, a relinquishing of privacy in the hope of comprehension. Not all who hand over footage find the understanding they seek. Some are thanked and then ghosted. Others receive unsolicited theories that feel like accusations. The community, imperfect as it is, learns the hard way that curiosity can wound. Scientists bring other tools. In labs, researchers try to reproduce anomalies by creating controlled disturbances, moving objects with strings, simulating drafts, setting off tiny motors behind cabinets. They record the results with cameras similar to those used by witnesses. These experiments expose many artifacts, compression glitches, parallax illusions, light scattering off dust. But they also reveal limits. Human attention and expectation change how an event is witnessed and later described. Two people can watch the same clip and tell different, irreconcilable tales. Words contort images into the shapes we need them to take. That subjective overlay resists being fully quantified. Then there are the testimonies that refuse the language of analysis. Once, a neighbor whose street had been physically quiet for years described how the air seemed to carry the feel of someone standing just behind her while she watered her plants, though no one was there. She clips no footage, only the memory of a presence and the odd fact that her yard's solar light flickers once, always, at the same hour each evening. These moments are harder to file. They are the edges of what a clip can show, the non-visual sense that something persists. People write to each other about such things in long, late messages, confessing sensations that seem foolish to say aloud, but oddly sacred when shared. Grief is perhaps the most decisive ingredient. When a camera captures an image that appears to respond to an absent person, a balloon that pulses as if catching a breath, a reflection that lingers near an empty chair, the footage becomes a vessel for mourning. Viewers project and console in equal measure. Some families find comfort in the attention. Strangers leave notes of sympathy and shared ritual instructions. Light a candle for 3 nights. Say the name once before you sleep. Others recoil, feeling their sorrow made public and consumable. The line between solace and spectacle thins quickly, and people learn to negotiate it as best they can. There is another undercurrent, the creation of local myth. In neighborhoods where several odd clips emerge, stories accrete. A porch light that refuses to die becomes the lantern of the block. A department store aisle where items shuffle slightly is the restless shelf. These names travel in short-form videos and chat threads, accompanied by snapshots and the shorthand of shared lore. The effect is to map the uncanny onto geography, to make certain places known for being receptive. For some, that mapping is a consolation. For others, it's a source of unease, as if the place has been labeled in a way that invites more phenomenon. Not every clip convinces. Skeptics continue their work, and their challenges are necessary. They remind the group to interrogate incentives. Why would someone stage a scene? And to consider the economics of virality. Their presence keeps standards from slipping into credulity. Still, even the most hardened analyst must reckon with the emotional fallout of these recordings. Watching footage of a family pausing at a headstone, of a child clutching a deflated balloon, or of a woman replaying a corridor 5 times to find the moment the light bends, those things do not only present puzzles, they present persons. Evidence without empathy is a brittle thing. So the cycle goes on. Footage arrives, is slowed, debated, comforted, and sometimes debunked. New rituals and vocabularies emerge, ways to say what cannot be proven, and the forms of care people adopt when proof is absent. The collection grows not just as a repository of images, but as a living ledger of how ordinary lives absorb and respond to the odd.